This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with Wolverhampton Wanderers foundation phase coach Marc Mclaren. He discusses his learnings from his study visit to Villarreal, the benefits of having diversity within his group and how it's affected the players within it, and the positive check and challenge culture that's been created at the club. We did have some technical issues whilst recording this podcast, so it may not sound quite as good as normal, but please bear with it as the conversation is well worth it. I hope you enjoy. So, Marc, thanks for spending a bit of time with me on your Tuesday morning. I guess the first question, how are things? How are you? Are you all safe and well?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me first off, Mike. Appreciate being on. All good at the moment. Difficult. Obviously, we're all in this situation. Motivation at times can be a little low. Just missing being in, getting back to a bit of normality. I think we had such a good run from August through to December in terms of getting our program back on its feet and players being in and having pretty much a normal schedule, games every single weekend. And we played a number of fixtures over that period. So to get back to that and then suddenly, boom, it's just back down to kind of nothing and back to kind of like an online format. It's a bit frustrating. But yeah, all good. Just hopefully can get back sometime soon.
Perfect. I guess for people that don't kind of know you or know your background, you just want to explain kind of what your role is and where you work and whatnot.
Yeah. So my current role is I'm the under-11s lead coach at Wolverhampton Wanderers Academy. I've been at the academy for approximately 6 years, just over 6 years now altogether. I've been a full-time coach there for about four and a half years. So it's been a pretty good stint so far. Worked a number of different roles in terms of age groups. So when I first entered, I entered in as a pre-academy coach part-time. I then quickly moved into the academy. I think my first role was as an under-10s assistant. And then I became a lead coach at under-9s. And then I landed a full-time position and just predominantly worked across the foundation phase from under-8s through to under-11s and touched on under-12s as well, but predominantly 9s to 11s.
You're obviously working kind of with the younger ones at the minute, and that's where kind of our paths cross. I guess in your time with the club, you would have seen quite a transformation in terms of their standing in kind of English football, but also the facilities and whatnot, the improvements and stuff there. For you, kind of seeing that transformation, how enjoyable has it been being part of that process? And is there anything in particular that stood out to you?
It's been unbelievable. Like, if I take you back, when I first joined the club, I think the club were 18th or something in the championship. Still great club, good academy, but we were limited in regards to some of the things that we could do, some of the players we can recruit. Wolverhampton is a very, very small area in comparison to kind of, if you think about our rivals or the teams we're kind of competing with in regards to kind of recruitment. We're competing with Birmingham City, we're competing with Aston Villa, we're competing with West Bromwich Albion, who are all based in Birmingham, which is a city that's, I don't know what the number, I think it's like 5 million big or something, whereas Wolverhampton's a few 100,000. So you are kind of struggling in that regard. So it was difficult. We had a good program in place. The facility had just been built, so the building that you would have seen when you come up to our place, that had just been built. I think it had just been finished. I think the summer before or the year before I joined. So that was great, but we all know it's largely a big part of your academy's recruitment, and we struggled in that regard. But then, obviously, over the years with the new investment, the new owners came in, more investment into the academy. That means we're able to cast our net a bit further in regards to recruitment and get some better players in, if you want to put it that way. The facilities, the things that we're able to do. And I think the biggest thing for me, or the biggest kind of what the new ownership has allowed us to do is introduce our international program. So over the last 2 years, pre-lockdown, pre-COVID, was able to start to travel a little bit more and take players away and just basically just give our players bigger and better experiences along their journey. So we've been to a number of different countries across Europe. Some of our groups have been lucky enough to travel to China, some of our older groups, and to Eastern Europe. And so just things like that. And we would never been able to do that a few years ago. I think there's boys in our under 15, 16s groups who have been on probably, you can probably count on one hand the amount of tours they've been on, because they were at the club when the club weren't able to do that. I think if you look at Morgan Gibbs-White, who's in our first team now, I didn't coach him myself, but I don't think he went on 5 tours as a youngster coming through the academy, whereas some of our boys now have been on 5 tours in one season. So that's been a massive part of the club. And then obviously, along with the ownership, just the exposure of the club. I think people look at us a little bit different now. I think before we were kind of seen as just this championship club. Category 1, but championship club, how people kind of perceive that sort of thing. But now we're actually seen as kind of a real force within the Premier League, and therefore within the academy program as well. So you do feel that. So yeah, we've been on a fantastic journey, and it's been amazing to be a part of it. Yeah.
And have you seen any cultural differences to the club? And I guess this can work in 2 ways. You have one in terms of ownership and what they've brought from their experiences, but I guess the other way you can look at it is in terms of your first team staff and players that obviously have a very heavy Portuguese heritage and link and stuff. Has any of that filtered down into the academy and challenged the way you or we would traditionally do stuff?
From what I know, obviously Nuno has his way of doing things, and I think culture is a massive part of what they do. Definitely brought a Portuguese feel. It was really interesting actually, speaking on one of the tours I went on, speaking to a coach from Porto, and we was just having a conversation similar to what we're having now in regards to that, and he was asking me about certain things that are happening at the club, and I said, yeah, those things do happen, and he was like, yeah, that's Nuno's way, that's how he likes things to be done. So, but in terms of filtering down, I think just standards. I think one big thing about Nuno's first team is, or from what I hear, I've not had a personal conversation with him, but it's just standards. It's just being on time, standards on and off the pitch. You see that in the team. I mean, in the way they play, it's a very disciplined way of playing football, and therefore you need to have certain standards in what you do on and off the pitch. And I think that's filtered down. So that filters down through kind of our academy manager, through our head of coaching, and then just challenging. I think we've got a very kind of check and challenge culture that I think we've always probably said we've had it, but definitely over the years that the first team have really started to really go. That I think that check and challenge culture has increased as well, because the fact of the matter is, it's now the challenge for us to get players into our first team has just gone up 2-fold, 10-fold, 100-fold, because we're signing players for 17-year-olds for 35 million. We're signing, Ruben Neves, João Moutinho, all these just ridiculously good players. So how are we going to get some of our boys into that mix as well? I think we benefit from the fact that Nuno has a small squad. So because he has a small squad, that definitely opens up opportunities for kind of some of our younger players to at least train in that group. And then you've probably seen with the change of the rules lately, in terms of having more players on the bench, we've had a lot of our academy boys have those experiences of being with the first team. But still, for being honest, that's still only a step. We want to see players actually playing week in, week out in the first team. So I think the culture has definitely gone to like we need to always be checking and challenging, being solution based, and I think that has filtered down from the first team just because of where we are as a club now.
In terms of the kind of in place check and challenge, how do you go about creating that culture? How was that embedded? What type, was there any explicit actions that were taken to encourage that? And how does that look from a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
I don't think there was anything particularly put in place. I think just over time, we've just got used to the powers that be, the guys that are in charge, kind of always just questioning, why are you doing that? What's the reasoning behind that? Not just allowing us to have free reign and us understanding the reasons for that. On a day-to-day basis, that probably just looks like, I've got my session plan ready. Someone's asking me about the session. Okay, what are you thinking today? So that constant kind of checking in. All right, but okay, have you thought about doing it this way? Have you thought about doing it that way? Which is fine. And then from a personal standpoint, I'm a very open person. And I think a lot of us are, in terms of we don't mind that. Actually it benefits us. And actually what it's taught me, what I probably do more because of that, is I probably go to my head of coaching, I probably go to the academy manager and other coaches to ask them for advice on sessions, like, oh, this is the idea I've got, what do you think? Whereas probably 6 years ago I probably didn't do that, because that can probably be perceived as I know weak, probably not the right word, but do you know what I mean? It's more you want to be seen to know what you're doing, what you're talking about. But actually there's actually a strength in being a little bit vulnerable and a little bit kind of open to that instant feedback. And I think that's just, I've kind of grown up in this as well. Like I said, I've been at the club 6 years now, so I've kind of got used to that. And also, during this period now, lockdown, I mean, we're having CPDs and things like that. So rather than just having the CPD and then it's gone, we'll have reflections. So we'll have a follow-up to the CPD. So I've actually got one later on today. So we had a CPD the other day. It was around about an initiative around final third play. So something that kind of head of coaching and the analysts have put together. So they've done that, but rather than letting that just go now, okay, now we're going to come back and have a meeting today about, okay, what do we think of that? What are we going to use? What did we like? What didn't we like? So I think that's just a culture that we're in. It's never just a kind of, here it is, right, just go away and use what you want. It's always coming back to the messages and talking about what we've been discussing.
And I assume from what you're saying there, it's kind of the leaders or the people at the top, the way they challenge, and I guess doing that in a healthy way, which then I guess trickles down kind of through your coaching staff and through your age group. So if they went in and were kind of being a bit gun-ho and were like, no, ripping session plans up, then all of a sudden that environment maybe doesn't look as positive. But if they're doing it a way where they are questioning you skillfully, and then maybe sometimes go, you know what, I really like that, see how it works, let me know, or other times might go, have you thought about this? It creates an environment where if you are challenged, you don't feel it as a personal attack. It's more, we're doing what's best for the environment, the other staff, the kids, or whatever that looks like.
Absolutely, totally agree. And that's exactly what it is. It's not a gung-ho approach. It's not, nah, that's rubbish, do something else. It's kind of, okay, I see what you're thinking there, but have you considered this? And then for me, being brave enough then to kind of, if they do suggest something else, being brave enough, but this is my thinking. And that has happened a few times where I've been questioned on something, because you always have to remember, the person sometimes won't understand the context of why you're doing something, especially if you just show them, say, oh, this is the session I'm looking at, and you explain it, but they might not understand the deeper meaning behind it. So once you explain that, then they might be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. Or you might explain it and they say, yeah, but I think it can be done in a better way. And what's great about our club is those people the people that I get to go to ask those questions. So whether it's, like I say, academy manager, head of coaching, foundation lead, they've all done my role. They've all coached at under 9s, under 10s, under 11s. So for me, that I like that personally, just because I know it's coming from a place of experience rather than I think in a football culture in England can be very hierarchical in terms of, like, you know, the under 23s coach is almost seen as the best coach, and it trickles down. So it's almost like, yeah, go and see the under 23 or the under 18s coach. But we know a lot of the times the under 18s coach at a lot of the academies have never coached a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and 9-year-olds. So asking them for their advice, yeah, they can give you some good stuff, but it doesn't come from a place of experience coaching that age group. It probably just comes from just a coaching experience. So that's why I feel quite lucky that the people that I can go to have coached at the age groups. So therefore, I think it can be more of a holistic view of that session and coaching that group of players.
And I'd imagine as well, kind of on this topic, is that at the top end, it's obviously more related to first team football. You know, you're close-ish to the first team. If you're at 18s, for example, a couple more steps, and hopefully they'll be in that environment. So it's going to be led quite a lot by current trends. You look at 3-5-2 that's made a comeback recently, or, you know, types of presses with Liverpool and stuff. And the 18s coach may specialise in that. But what he maybe doesn't specialise in is an under 9 who has been cooped up at school all day, has got loads of energy, and you're trying to get him to engage in a 1v1. And so it's an interesting point you make in terms of, actually, everyone's got a skill set. It's just where you've developed that skill set and, you know, how you use that in an appropriate environment.
Exactly. And like you say, that I think the older they get, kind of the percentages of the focus changes, doesn't it? So, you know, the under 23s coach is probably not thinking technical that much. He's probably expecting the lads in the under 23s, he's expecting them to be able to execute things well technically. He's probably looking more from a tactical and maybe a psychological point of view. Whereas, even though we definitely do consider that, I mean, as the under 11s coach, I do think tactically at times. I'm definitely thinking psychologically. Our program is based around technical outcomes, and nothing sits on its own. Everything's kind of intertwined with each other. But that's what I'm thinking. So I'm thinking about, you know, can you receive on the half turn? Can you receive with the back foot? Is the type of pass you use the correct one? Did you punch it in? Things like that, as you will know. So the viewpoint is different. It's different. So when you're trying to deliver these sessions and putting these sessions together, that's definitely what we're thinking about. And it's different from the age groups above or the higher ones.
Is there any examples of a time you've been challenged either by like your head of coaching or academy manager or any of the staff on the way through, that you've come away and gone, that was so simple but so effective, and it's kind of adapted your approach moving forward?
Yeah, like definitely there's been a number of times that's happened, particularly from Scott. Scott Sellers, our academy manager. He's actually gone up to being technical director now, but he's still kind of overseeing the academy. But yeah, sometimes he can break down a practice into a real simplistic manner, and you're like, oh, okay, I can see how that will work. And then what I'll do, I'll always go out and try it. and sometimes I'll get it wrong in regards to like I don't know, the space. So for example, one of his favorite practices is a 4-goal game, because a 4-goal game you get a lot of outcomes, but one of the biggest outcomes is kind of switching the play technically, pass detail, moving it quickly, recognizing opportunities to switch, overloads, things like that. And I remember he really enjoys that practice, and I hadn't done it for a while, so I did it, but I got the area wrong. It was too small. I couldn't really get it out, so I went back to him, spoke it through, and then to be honest with you, at the time I didn't recognize that it was the area was the problem. So when I went back to him, we had a conversation, and then boom, and it seems really, really simple. I'm probably talking it through now. I feel a little bit silly because I'm like, how did I not recognize that? But sometimes you are just engrossed in the practice, and then your mind's going, you're thinking, oh, this is not quite working. I'm not sure how to really correct it right now. And sometimes it just takes those real simple conversations to get it out. I think also, like, in that practice, I'd locked the boys in the area to begin with, which meant that actually I couldn't get the outcome out that I wanted, because there was never the correct or the overload on one side to free up the space on the other side of the pitch. So little things like that. And I think we are all coaches that will put on practices, will get it wrong. We've got to be brave enough and be open enough to kind of ask advice of others, whoever that might be. It doesn't necessarily have to be the academy manager, the head of coaching. Me and the under-12s coach Ryan, we speak all the time about practices, because we work so close together, and sometimes there'll be, I'll push players into his group. Sometimes a couple of his players might come and play with the 11s at different times. So it's important that we're always communicating. So I'll always ask his advice. I tried this and it didn't quite work. What do you reckon? And he'll do the same with me. So we're just an open group of coaches, and sometimes simple. And I really love simple practices. I don't like complicated stuff. I don't like stuff that it takes me 10 minutes to get the kids to understand what I want them to do. I want the ball rolling straight away. This is what I need you to do, boys. Boom, let's go and do it. Because I just think it just wastes time, and it's not enjoyable for a 10-year-old to be standing around. They just want to play. So I'm a big fan of simple practices.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept around the ball rolling time, and I think what you said there is really good. And I know in my experience, that sometimes you have it where you put a practice on, you're like, why isn't this working? I don't understand. And it just takes someone to step back a little bit and go, oh, it's just this. There's one in particular. I remember I was doing a phase of play, and we were looking at midfield receiving, and I'd set it up kind of locked in, but kind of not. I'd said that certain players had to be in certain areas, but everyone could go through. And the essential issue I had was I didn't have enough players in the central area to allow the practice. And I did it on the Wednesday, didn't work. Started on the Friday, didn't work. And then I got my boss at the time to come and have a look. And he went, just move these two in there. And literally within 5 minutes, I've got all the outcomes I've been searching for 2 sessions for. But I think the bravery, like you said there, to be willing to get it wrong a couple of times to then get what could potentially be a really good session and outcomes important. In terms of for you guys as an academy, what is your academy vision? What is the Wolves way, if you like?
I guess it's based around principles. So kind of trying to dominate possession as much as we can, playing through the thirds, controlling the opposition without the ball, things like that. We've got a kind of a list of stuff that we kind of work off, but essentially, as an academy, we want to produce exciting players across the pitch. We want players that are adaptable, can play in multiple positions, because that's a real key feature, and that's probably something probably changed over the last couple of years, actually, 2 or 3 years, kind of looking at Nuno's teams and realizing actually players need to be adaptable. So if I point out someone like, I don't know, Traore being the obvious one, if you count the number of positions you've seen him playing in a Wolves team, it's 3 or 4. Dendoncker, same. He's played high up the pitch, he's played in the middle of the pitch, he's played at the back. Connor Cody's had to adapt this year. He's gone from playing. He was a midfielder, wasn't he? Back in the day, but then he's very much a middle of a back three. Then he's had to go and play in a back four. So that adaptability of the players is really, really important, and it's probably something that we've done at foundation phase for a long time. But I think the age groups up as well are having to consider that as well, and making sure that players can play across the pitch. And I think that where we've changed as well, and I think this comes back to my original point when I was talking about the importance of recruitment, is if you look at historically at Wolves over the last kind of 15, 20 years, the positions that have kind of been the most successful have been kind of at the back. So, if I point at players like Dom Iorfa, Danny Bart, Ebanks Landell, Carla Keeby, they all play at the back end of the pitch. And I don't think that is a coincidence in terms of where the academy was. So I think that you're a product of your environment. You're a product of, what is going on at your club. So I think that historically, because probably Wolves haven't been able to recruit far and wide and have the best players, like, for example, like a Chelsea, for example, where Chelsea produce players all over. Well, they produce really attacking players. I think that if you look at it, the academy teams, probably when those boys were coming through, probably spent the majority of their time without the ball defending, and therefore those are the players you're gonna produce. But we also know that to be really profitable and kind of maximize that market, it's the players at the top end of the pitch that are really going to bring in the money for the club, in terms of not only getting players into the first team, but also being able to move players on. So I think that's kind of the aim of the club now, is to try and produce more of those exciting players at the sharp end of the pitch, and that's really good for us. And the sort of better our groups are getting at the younger age groups, it means we can be on the ball more. It means we can, produce those exciting players that are able to beat players 1v1 and go and score more goals and create more opportunities on the pitch. I think that's kind of one of the big kind of changes over the last few years for the club.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I've said it on here before. I was on a course and they mentioned this, and they said if you look at like Pickford, Maguire, Walker, Stones, all of them started at other academies where maybe they had to defend slightly more than attack, and then have gone to move on. And I think it's really interesting that obviously there's a theme there for you guys in terms of when maybe you weren't able to go out and recruit consistently, or, when you weren't able to draw in all the best players from Birmingham or surrounding areas, you naturally retreat slightly, which means you get more opportunities to defend as an academy. I think it's a really interesting point. In terms of making lads more adaptable, I guess in terms of positions and principles, how do you go about doing that from a week-to-week basis? Do you have a curriculum in place? Is there a set of guidelines for coaches to follow? What does that look like?
I think the first thing is definitely kind of the focus on development over winning, and that's been a challenge for everybody. There's no point in denying that, really, but that comes from the top. And our academy manager Scott, he is very, very clear on that, particularly with us as foundation. He said to me, it was actually, funny enough, it was actually after a game in the Corey Price. I think I was playing against you, and that was a competitive day, so that didn't really matter. That was okay. That that was okay for me to kind of drive the boys and want to try and win that game. I don't remember. I wonder if you remember that game. I think we drew 0-0 or 1-1. It was at our place.
Yeah, I remember. I'll be honest.
Game.
We'd played Man City the day before, so the lads had turned up. We beat Man City, and then we played your boys. And I was like, their legs are looking tired.
Yeah,
yeah, I do remember that game.
I remember saying, like, you know, really driving the boys. And what he said to me was, "That's okay, but like," and the message that he kind of really emphasizes all the time is, I don't care about the result. I just want to turn up. But when I come and watch you play, I just want to see the boys doing the right things, playing in the right way, trying the things that, you know, we talk about. So when you hear that from your academy manager, it takes the pressure off of the thought of, okay, if we lose today, particularly on a Sunday games program game. So I think that's definitely the first kind of thing that's put in place. So then what that allows you to do then is be free to start to rotate the players. So I'll talk about my current group. I've had a real challenge this year so far in regards to having a number of players that can play in central midfield. But even though that's a challenge, it's actually a positive challenge, because what it means is that I can rotate players naturally into different positions rather than having to force it. So I've got one boy that's predominantly played at the back so far this year, but more and more he's really showing that he can play in central midfield as well. So, you know, moving him in there, playing different players at the back, allowing him to develop. And actually, I think long term he might be a centre back. Who knows? You know, we can't make those sorts of predictions. But if I was to put my money on it, that's probably where he'll end up. But what he is showing is that by playing in centre midfield, he's getting more touches on the ball. He's having to play 360 now, so he's having to see all around him. His recovery runs are higher, like he's having to do more sprints. So our under 11s wear the GPS vests, so we're able to see that. So his numbers weren't really getting any, they weren't high at all, and that's because he was playing at the back and he was pretty much just standing there the whole game. So little things like that. So we're encouraged to do that and get different outcomes for different players. And I've got another player that one of probably the top players in the group. You know, he's played up front, he's played on the right, he's played in the 10. I've got players that they look like they're going to be central players, so play in the 4, play in the 8, play at centre back. You know, maybe stick you up front at times. So I'm constantly rotating and adapting. The other way we can do it, not just on the pitch but off the pitch as well. So one thing that's really, really improving all the time is our analysis department. So being able to so every game gets clipped, which I know is a real luxury. So every single one of our games gets clipped. So the boys are able to go back and watch their clips back. We're able to go back and watch their clips back and talk about certain things within the game, playing in those different positions. Now, I don't focus too much tactically. I will touch on it a little bit, but I don't want that to be the main focus. Mostly still thinking about those technical outcomes, you know, where you are on the pitch, and then how are you receiving the ball in that position? Are you on the half turn? Are you scanning? You know, what sort of pass can you make in that position? And then can you execute it? So different things like that. So the analysis and then just that natural rotation of players is definitely a way of kind of helping the players adapt to different areas of the pitch.
And how do you frame that to the boys? Because I'd imagine, you know, if you've got a centre back who's played there for the majority of his life, even though he's young, and then you're saying to him, "Oh, we're going to play you as an 8 today, or you're going to play as a 7 today." Obviously, there may be a dip in perceived performance because, you know, there might be times where his body shape isn't correct to receive or doesn't check and loses the ball. How do you go about framing that so that the players understand that those challenges are going to benefit them in the long term?
Well, I'll probably repeat what I said to you in regards to kind of, first of all, using first team examples. So I say, look at Traore. He's played right wing back. He's played right wing. He's played in the 10. He's played up front. So that's an example, right? And they're always looking at the top end, aren't they? They're always looking for those examples. Also, I think kids, a lot of the time they see, am I the only one that's having to do this, or are other people having to do it? So when you can use examples of other kids having to do it, then you'd hope that they'd see that as, okay, you're not just picking on me. This is not just something that you're just asking me to do. There are those players, and don't get me wrong, you know, I've had it this season. I've had players that, I've got one boy that has predominantly played in centre midfield his whole life. I mean, when you say his whole life, the kid's 10 years old, so it's kind of like a few years in the grand scheme of things. And it's been really hard for him to understand why suddenly I'm asking him to do something else. Not just him, but his parents as well. But the message that, you know, you try to put out there is, look, you know, we can continue to persist and play him in this one single position, but when it comes down to it, if you are not outstanding, unbelievable, literally the best we've got in that position, or it might not even be that, it might be just a change of opinion. So you're with me now under 11s, you get to under 14s, and suddenly the under 14s coach has recruited a player's come in from, we've recruited a boy from Newcastle who's come in for however hundreds, thousands of pounds, or whatever it might be, because we know that's how academy football works. And suddenly he's playing in the same position as you, and he's perceived to be better. What else can you do now? Where else can you go? All right, I'm going to try you here, but then you've never played there before. So suddenly now decision time's come in, and it's almost like, all right, what are you going to do? So you have to frame it, and I probably wouldn't go into that deep. I wouldn't go into that detail with the player, but particularly with the parent, I'd go into that detail and say, look, we've got to do this, and it's not that he's not going to play in his favoured position. He needs to have something. He needs to have two, like one or two other positions that he understands and can go do well at, just in case anything happens. And also it can benefit you in that position. So like I just said, you know, that one boy that probably going to be a centre back, but I think by playing him in centre midfield, it expands his knowledge, and then it also gives you an appreciation. Paul McGuinness at Man United, we had a CPD with him during the first lockdown, I think it was, and he talked about, they use a phrase at Man United called pass appreciation. So basically what that means is, if you play a player in a different position, so he used Rashford as the example. So Rashford was predominantly a 9, or maybe played on the wing, but he said by playing him in a different position, he now understands the type of pass that player would want, if that makes sense. So say you're a winger, but then suddenly you're playing up front, and then you go back to being a winger. Well, I've played up front, so now I understand the type of pass you would want in that position, and having that pass appreciation. So there's so many different outcomes from that rotation. But yeah, it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge explaining that. But so far, so good. There's been a couple of hiccups in terms of just trying to get those messages from. But at the end of the day, we coach at an academy level. We coach at a level where we've got to constantly be developing these players. Otherwise, they will get left behind. We have to try and do what we think is best for them for their long-term development.
I think it's a really interesting point. You look at someone like John O'Shea. He was probably at Man United for the years because he could do a number of things they needed him to do. He could play centre-back, right-back, left-back, centre-mid, one of the wide players. And actually, it becomes a real useful tool for a manager, knowing you've got someone who is dependable and has the knowledge base to be able to cope with those roles. And I think what you've touched on there around gaining knowledge is really interesting. You talk to like defenders or previous defenders, and sometimes they make really good striker coaches in terms of movement. And why is that? Because they tell you what they hated. They tell you as a centre back, what did I hate? What did I hate the most? Well, I hate it when you stand off this shoulder and I can't see man and ball. Okay, well, that's a really easy principle to get across to a striker from someone who's talking in personal experience. So
Absolutely.
I think giving players the opportunity to be in that role and go, okay, so how do I like receiving the ball, or what movements are challenging for the other player to mark and stuff, then hopefully broadens their knowledge and kind of goes from there and increases their output. How challenging is it for you to implement this, I guess, within a games program as well? Also, we touched on earlier the Corey Price, which is relatively competitive in terms of the teams that are there. And although obviously football's always about, particularly these age groups, the development side, I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we said that kids don't want to win when they play. I think they absolutely do. So how challenging is it when you're encouraging kids to maybe step outside of his comfort zone against a really good team, against a Chelsea, against a Birmingham, a Southampton, a Cardiff, whoever that might be?
So I think the way we do it is a challenge. It is a challenge because, first of all, I think sometimes you can get caught up in the game. But I think the way you combat that, or the way I found myself, so I'm going to speak from my own personal kind of experience, is the way I can kind of combat that is planning the periods beforehand, planning my subs beforehand. So rather than doing it off the fly, where then it kind of gives you an excuse to use the scoreline as a reason to do or not to do something. If I've already planned it, then I'm gonna stick to that. It's a bit easier to stick to that. Also rag rating the games. So as like everyone kind of does now, you look at your fixtures and you kind of say, okay, this is a red game. This is, what up against it today. So probably what I wouldn't do is start playing players in positions that they're now uncomfortable because they're already uncomfortable. Even in their strongest position, they are already uncomfortable. So if we're going to, and I'll use them as the example, we're going to Man City, away at Man City, kids are nervous. They know they're going to be up against it. I'm not suddenly going to start telling the right winger, you're going to go play a centre back for a period because he's thinking, flipping out, I'm struggling already where I am. And now you're going to put me somewhere completely different. So I think that's an important distinction to make. So if the game was an amber game, then there will be some rotation. If the game was a green game, then there'll be massive rotation. But I mean, if I perceive the game as a green game, then they might only play in their strongest positions for one period, and they'll spend the rest of the game somewhere completely different. We had a game against like a private academy just before we finished for Christmas, and I pretty much played. No, not pretty much. Every player played out of position, and then I was just doing crazy stuff like I just shout switch, and I'd already preempted what the switch meant. So literally at that moment when I shouted switch, all the players had to run into their new position and then play for a little bit, and then I'll switch it again and switch it. So they're constantly thinking, okay, what's my new responsibility? What's my new role? And I had my striker playing at centre back, I had my 10 playing at right back, like just crazy stuff. So that's how you can get it out. I think the rag rate is important. Understanding, there's no point for me making the kids completely so uncomfortable that they get absolutely nothing out of it. You always want there to be an element of success. I think challenge is really, really important, but I think just as important is success as well within the games. You want them to feel that, okay, yeah, I can see how that's worked for me.
I think it's a really interesting principle, and I know from speaking to a few people at the FA, Ajax do something similar where they have a number-based system. So if they're playing 7-a-side, for example, they have numbers 1 to 9. and then every 10 minutes the players rotate around that number. So they won't have like a set goalkeeper, for example. Everyone would get an opportunity in goal. Everyone would get an opportunity right back, left back, and you work your way through the entire system until you've done all 10, which I think is a really interesting way of doing it. And like you said there, I think the context of when you're doing this is important. When they're already stressed or in a stressful situation, that's probably when they need more support, and this may not be the right time to do it for all of them. I still think for some of them, the ones that you can stretch, you might chuck them in a challenging environment to get those extra awards. But in your green games, I think it's a real opportunity for them just to develop in different areas and see different pitches, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing you mentioned, which I haven't had extensive amounts of experience with, so it'd be interesting to see kind of the benefits of it, is the GPS side. So how have you found using that with the 11s, and kind of what major outcomes have you had from it?
Just really interesting. It's more for us. It's more for us rather than the players. Obviously, the players enjoy wearing it from a psychological point of view. It makes them feel closer to the goal. It makes them, they see the older players wearing these GPS vests, and it makes them feel kind of a bit special in regards to that. But the interesting thing is we can start to really look at, okay, what we consider our elite players doing within the games. We can start to compare and contrast across the age groups, across previous data. So we can definitely see what the boys are doing. We can compare them to one another within the groups. Now, what we don't do, as they wouldn't do it at any level, is compare, the positions. We compare, what's this centre midfielder doing in comparison to that centre midfielder. But then we all know it goes a little bit deeper than that, because it's not about kind of if you ran the most and that means you've been the most effective, but you can get some kind of idea about levels of effort, and do they need to be doing more. One of the really interesting ones I got was I've got one boy who every game, his distance covered is unbelievable. His number of sprints, he blows absolutely everyone out of the park with the number of sprints he's doing. So he's kind of, I don't know whether you like HML is like the number that kind of comes out in regards to the accels and decels and things like that. And he was just blowing everyone out of the park. So when the first few weeks that he had it on, I'm like, how decent. And he's like in the top 3 in the group in regards to kind of performance. But then what we realized was the reason why he was getting all these sprints is because he's always out of position. So top player, scores goals, creates goals, skillful, ball mastery is unbelievable. But then defensively, he's never in the right place. So other team gets the ball, he's not standing in the right place. So now suddenly he's having to do a sprint to go and close down the player that's got the ball. Whereas if his positioning was better in the first place, he probably wouldn't have that sprint, because he's not 25 yards away from him, he's 10 yards away from him. So that was like a real interesting outcome from having it, and we were able to show him that. Then I was able to find footage of times where, so basically what was happening is that whenever the ball went off the pitch, he switches off. Ball goes out for a throw in, he completely switches off. Ball goes out for a goal kick, switches off. Ball gets kicked or thrown back onto the pitch, now he's suddenly switched back on. Boom, he's sprinting to where he needs to be. So basically what we're trying to explain to him at the moment is, actually, as the pitch starts to open up, and he's playing 9v9 now, as the pitch starts to open up and you go 11v11, you won't be able to maintain that for 90 minutes. You just won't be able to do it unless you're absolutely superhuman. So it's not all. So I think you can fall into a trap of thinking, oh yeah, his sprints are really, really good. He's working really, really hard. His HML is excellent, this, that, and the other. When actually it's too high. It's too high. And the reason for it is is more of a tactical outcome that we need to correct. So it can work both ways.
So that's obviously a really interesting diagnosis, I guess. What made you look at that in such detail, or what made you have that realization?
It wasn't me. I'll put my hands up. It was so I'm lucky enough to have a sports scientist, an intern sports scientist that works with me, works with the group. So it's like there's a team of 3. So there's me, my assistant coach, support coach, and then there's my sports scientist. So it's something that he actually, funny enough, now I'm talking about him, he actually worked at Southampton as a on his what do you call placement year. Okay. during his undergrad. He worked with the first team. It was the year that Southampton were in the Europa League. Van Dijk was there. The team was decent. What was the manager's name? The French guy was the manager.
Who
was the manager. So he's a young guy. I mean, he did that, I think, maybe how many years ago would that be now? Maybe 5 years ago or something like that.
5, I would have thought.
So he has got extensive experience. I'm very, very lucky to have him as my sports scientist. I mean, he's gone from Southampton first team, and now he's working kind of under 11s, which is crazy. But he's doing his masters. So he's doing his masters at Wolverhampton University. So as a part of his masters, we get interns from the university. So yeah, it's something that he spotted, to be honest with you. But then once he's told me, I've looked at it because in my head, as I'm a coach, I've got a little bit of experience within sports science through my degree, but nothing to that kind of level. So when I was seeing the data, I was thinking brilliant. I was thinking, man, this kid's like fit, he's on it, he's sharp, he's closing. But then my sports scientist was just like, well, now what's happening is he's just out of position all the time. And actually we need to calm him down, because he needs to understand that. And I guess that tactical element links to psychological. So like I say, everything's intertwined. So psychologically, if ball goes off the pitch, he's not thinking about, okay, where do I need to be now? He's only thinking about that when the ball's in play. So yeah, it wasn't me. I can't take credit for it.
No, I think it's really interesting. I think, so obviously what you're doing there is kind of being guided by the data in terms of you've got this information, rather than settling for the first thing of going, oh, this is really good. And he must be fit as a fiddle. You're now looking into why there's possible reasons for that. And imagine that will be awareness for you moving forward, kind of when you get some of this data. If something's really low or really high or whatnot, you'll go, okay, well, let's dig a little bit deeper on that. Why is it so low? Maybe it's just because he's always in the right position, never has to sprint. And exactly, then we need to work on getting him out of position, so he needs to do more of those high intensity runs, because he's constantly in position. So I imagine that's a really good learning experience for you as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I mean, you can be guided by the data, but that can't be the be all and end all. Just use it as guidance. I mean, use it just as another example on the other end of the scale, or kind of different. So we had a boy that came back in after lockdown, and everybody was going, he's putting a bit of weight. He's looking a bit chunky. I think we need to get him on a program. Find out what he's eating, things like that. The boys did a fitness test. He came top. His data shows, the GPS data shows, he's covering the most distance in games. He's one of my top players as well. Like, he's playing the majority of the minutes. His game percentage is really, really high. So it's really interesting that everyone was looking at him thinking, yeah, he's not going to be fit. He's just come back in from lockdown. He probably hasn't done anything. When actually the GPS data told us something completely different. And that's not saying that he can't get better and we should just be like, oh no, he's fine. But I think also it can guide you into the fact that actually he's smashing everybody. He's smashing everybody in regards to distance covered, HML, all that kind of stuff. So you can use the data to kind of guide you, but you need to kind of definitely delve a little bit deeper into different things.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something that I hope that I'll be able to use a little bit more. Kind of linking back to, I guess, a theme that's been throughout this and something that you have experience in is kind of recruitment for you guys now. As you said, it's taken a bit of a step on in terms of who you're able to attract and where you're able to get players from. What does that currently look like for you? How do you go about getting kind of players into your system? And what would you say is the USP for the Wolves Academy in quite a, I'd imagine, lack of a better term, volatile area in terms of you've got so many clubs in that region all trying to get the best players. What does that look like for you guys?
I think the biggest difference, I guess, that's happened is our recruitment network has been expanded, which is kind of a I guess a natural kind of thing that was going to happen when you've got more investment, more money within the different departments. Therefore, we can get more boots on the ground. I guess more boots on the ground, more scouts out there watching players. What we've been able to do. So when I first joined the club, all our players looked the same. There wasn't much diversity within the club. We had a lot of kind of middle class kids coming from Wolverhampton, some kind of working class kids within Wolverhampton, but not many. And then kind of the surrounding areas, they were coming from kind of like Stafford, I know Shrewsbury, these sorts of areas. By throwing the net out, we've now our groups are a lot more diverse. White kids, black kids, Asian kids. We've got a real diverse looking academy now, which is fantastic. The way we've been able to do that is, we've been able to go into Birmingham and start to compete with those. Now, when you say USP, I think the main USP was that the first team was on a rise, right? So we were going up and our local rivals were kind of on a bit of a downer. We swapped positions with West Brom, which I think was key in that season that we got promoted. Aston Villa were in the Championship at the time as well. So that's nothing that we've done. I think people are just fickle. If I'm being honest, people are just naturally fickle. So people always look at what's the state of the first team. That must be a reflection of the academy, and we know as guys that we're on the ground, we're in the clubs. It's nothing. If I look at Southampton a few years ago, Southampton were in disarray, and now Southampton as a club looking unbelievable, great training and things like that. But we know that in terms of the academy, the things that we do is the things that we do, and we can look after our players. But people on the outside will always look at the first team, and be like, oh, the first team's no good, so therefore I'd rather. I saw it in the first couple of years I was at the academy. I saw players go and sign for Villa and sign for I think West Brom were the powerhouse, really. Go and sign just because their first team was doing the best out of the three clubs. And then obviously you still got Birmingham City as well on the other side. So that was kind of that unique. Now we're all Premier League. We're all Premier League now. So now you've really got to have like a unique a USP. You've got to really be able to kind of sell your club. So I think one thing we're all about the people. One thing we're really proud of is that when people come to our club, they always like the way we made them feel. There's a saying, kind of people always remember the way you made them feel rather than the things that you say. So we always try and just make people feel as welcome as we can. it's genuine as well. I don't think that many people come to Wolves and leave us, and even on a games program day, you know, obviously you've been to our place a number of times, and like things like the Koi price, that was something that I kind of took on, primarily kind of led that for us, and my main thing was making sure that everyone just comes and just has a good day and leaves there thinking, yeah, that was class, that was one of the best rounds of the Koi price. So that was the main thing. But I guess the other main thing, what we were able to do, particularly going back to kind of the owners and kind of giving us a bit more financial backing, is that now we can go and recruit those inner city players from Birmingham. We can give them a little bit of aid in terms of getting the boys in, because the fact of the matter is we can't go to Birmingham. Well, where we're based is a really kind of awkward place to get to. I mean, you get up the motorway, you get off the motorway, and you're still nowhere near our training ground. You got to fight your way through Wolverhampton. You got to get around the ring road. You know, it's not like other training grounds where boom, you're just off the motorway and you're there straight away. You know, I feel like we're miles away from the motorway, from the links. So we've got to give those families support. We've got to show those families some sort of support to get their sons in, and help them out. So we can provide some transport and some help in that regard. You know, because the fact of the matter is, if we want to benefit from, you know, those boys, then we've got to help them in whatever way we can. So yeah, so that's kind of the things that we're doing, and I know other clubs do that as well. I know that's not unique to us. I think what we've had to do was being able to do that as well, because that's the only way that we can try and compete for these players.
No, I think it's interesting. Obviously, doing that support, which, you know, some families and some players need, is a big one. And I think what you talk about there in terms of timing is crucial as well. I mean, I look at Southampton a few years ago, when people like Gareth Bale, Theo Walcott and stuff came through. It was obviously academy vision. We wanted to get young players in. It was also out of necessity to a degree at the time, because, you know, they'd had a bit of a bad run and had been relegated on a couple of occasions. And it's just now that they, you know, as we're on an up and up and into Premier League, we're continuing to make a more conscious effort to make sure those young players get in. And that's one of the things I love about the first team manager at the moment, Ralph Hasenhüttl, is the number of young players that get in opportunities. And you're going to get occasional bad results, as they may have done recently, but the ability to get those players through is really good. And for you guys, being, you know, when you're going up and doing really well and everyone likes the brand of football, and I think it's very rare that you hear negative things come out of the club. A lot of it's very positive from the top end, which helps. Combine that with your ideas around making good people or showing people that you care is a really good one. I guess something that I'd like to ask you about is the diversity within the group. I guess both like racial and area, etc., and socio-economic and whatnot. How do you feel that's benefited? I guess more importantly, the lads themselves. How do you think that bending in periods of having a cross section of society has helped them?
It's massive. It's absolutely massive. So, like I say, when I first come into the club, all the kids look the same. I remember coaching a group. It's our current, I want to say it's our current under 15s group, when they were under 10. And the boy's not with us anymore, but we had a boy in the group. He was the only black boy in the group. And at the time, I never took any notice of it, really. It wasn't until I think they were under 11s and we played one of the under, he's under 14 now, but we played like the top player in the under 10s group at the time. We played him up, and who did this boy? And he's a black boy as well. And who did the under 11 gravitate to? It was this kid straight away, and it was almost like And I saw it straight away. I was like, wow, like they're like they're like almost best mates. And it was simply, for me, it was, you look like me. I can relate to you. So therefore, I now feel more comfortable within this group. This kid was traveling from Birmingham, traveling in, coming from, he lived in Handsworth, a real like low socioeconomic area, coming in, and he's having to try and mix in with these boys who are coming from Telford and Stafford and like the kind of Tetnall area, Codsall areas of Wolverhampton, which are kind of more kind of middle class areas, and he just didn't. And when I look back on it now, I think, was that one of the reasons why he didn't quite perform? Because he just didn't feel a part of the group. And this remind, not to go too off tangent, but I remember a photo coming out. I don't know if you remember this, of the England under 20. I think it was the under 21s, the England under 19s. Damari Gray and boys like that were in the thing. I think it was the under 19s, and it was a photo from the dinner hall, and literally all the black players were sitting on one table, and all the white players were sitting on another table, and there was a massive thing made of it in the media. It was almost like the FA, what's this? What's happening here? There needs to be more inclusivity and blah, 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 blah. And I was thinking to myself, what are you talking about? Like, that's just, don't get me wrong, like, people from different racial backgrounds, we mix together, and that's brilliant. But at the same time, sometimes in groups like that, people do naturally gravitate to people that look like them. That's not necessarily a negative thing. Sometimes that's a positive. You have similar experiences, life experiences. These boys in the England group, maybe they play for the same clubs, maybe. So I know that's not a racial thing, but they listen to the same music, they have the same interests, their lifestyles are very, very similar. So that means they will naturally gravitate to one another. And I didn't like the way, in that instance, it was made to be this real big racial kind of divide within the England group. It just wasn't. So going back to our groups, I think strength comes in diversity. So what you find is you've just got boys who think and do things in different ways because they have just different experiences. But for me, that's where the strength comes. So we have boys that come from kind of more wealthy backgrounds, and you have kids that are coming from inner city backgrounds, living in high-rise flat, and they're just they come from these different areas, these different backgrounds, but they make it work for themselves, and that's the strength of the groups now, and that's what I see within the groups. And what it also does is, for some of these boys, what I see is these friendships being created that are very unlikely friendships, in terms of, because they play football together and they have this bond of being on the same football team, no matter what their background is, whether they're wealthy, not so wealthy, poor, whatever that might be, they've got this bond. So I'm seeing some great friendships being developed within these foundation phase groups, where these kids probably would have never ever met, because the one kid might be at a private school in, I don't know where the private school is, but he's at a private school, and the other kids at like a really rough inner city school. They probably would have never ever met, but the football's brought them together, and now they're having sleepovers at each other's houses, and this, that, and the other, and it's fantastic. So that's what I see now. And then also, I think we see that on the pitch. We see some kids that are willing to go and get downright and dirty in the games, and be a little bit more streetwise within the games as well, which is something that we just didn't have. We couldn't compete 6 years ago when I first joined the club. We could not compete with Birmingham City, particularly at foundation phase, I must say. We couldn't compete with Birmingham City. We couldn't compete with West Brom. we struggled against Villa. Like those three clubs, we really struggled against. This season, it was the first time it's ever happened. I don't know, West Brom are going through their own kind of transition at the moment. We beat West Brom at every single age group across the board, 9s to 14s. Never happened before. And then we're competing and beating Birmingham at foundation phase. We're competing and beating Villa at foundation phase. So I'm just seeing that because of that diversity of the groups, we're able to do that now.
I think it's a really interesting idea, and I think the ability to have diversity, and I think a diversity of idea and opinion is the really big one for me. And a lot of you there being street smart. I've done a little bit of work with kids that have come out of certain areas of London. And one of the things I noticed, if the foul was given away, he'd just walk off with the ball for a little bit. And I actually asked him, I said, why is that? He goes, that's what I do in the cages. So I'm not going to let him do a thing. So in the cages, he does that. And, you know, that in that context, he was able to, he's really physical in his 1v1 duels. And what I found, I don't know if you had similar, but that then transpires to the rest of the group. So if he's very physical in his 1v1s, a boy who maybe naturally isn't like that, be it from inner city, outer city, he's like, well, in order to compete, I've got to. I've got no choice. So then
it's demand of the game.
You've got, rather than having one or two are like that, you've got 5 or 6. Yeah. And then you've got that 6 going against this 6. And then that, the other 6 are like, well, all of a sudden, in order for us to compete against those guys, we've got to. Then all of a sudden, your entire group gets to a stage where actually it's really competitive, and it's just about framing that competition within the group. And that's come from the diversity to start with.
Exactly. And that's a great point. And while you're talking, I'm thinking of examples. There's a boy in our under 12s who his inclusion in the group is unbelievable. You know, you talk about what I can't remember the term he uses. You know, Damien Hughes. So we actually had a CPD with Damien Hughes yesterday, but he in his book The Barcelona Way. Cultural architects. So you have these people, these individuals within groups that will make the culture. They'll drive the culture. This one boy in particular, you know, he's from West Bromwich. Very, very lucky to have him. But he is a cultural architect within his group. You know, he's competitive like you wouldn't believe. Doesn't matter what team he's on. I can put him with on the worst team. His team, they might not win, but they've got a chance. And that's the point about him. He gives his team a chance. That's on pitch, off pitch. Personalities absolutely second to none. Funny. He's sensible, but he's funny. He involves everyone. Everyone gravitates to him. You know, it's really, really funny when you're on the coach or on the bus or you're on tour. You know, everyone gravitates to him. Everyone wants to sit next to him because he's just such great value to the group. And there's another boy in my group as well. And again, socially, great player, excellent player, but socially is where that's his elite. He's elite, I would say, socially. He's not even from England. You know, he's come from South America. He's, you know, absolutely fantastic. Everyone gravitates to him. We actually had a tour that got cancelled due to COVID-19. And at the time, performance-wise, he was on a little bit of a downturn at the time. I mean, this year he's come back and he's turned it up again. But performance-wise, he was, you know, you're picking a squad of 12 players, for example. He was 12 or 13. It was a toss-up. The reason why I selected him, and I told him this, because I said to him, look, I think performance-wise, you need to do the A, B, and C. You need to improve. But the reason why I selected him is because socially, he will bring that group together on a tour. You know, you go away, backs are against the wall. He'll bring everyone together. You're in the restaurant in the evening. he's making everybody laugh. He's entertaining everybody. He's kind of driving that. So I don't think you can look past those things in players. I think those are just as important as how good he is at taking a free kick. You need to look at those other bits as well. So so those are all the other things that kind of have to be considered, I think.
Yeah, and I think clubs are getting better and better at doing that, which is pleasing. I think that the diversity of ideas, both in your players and in your coaches, is only something that's going to help, because it's going to challenge people in preconceptions, or challenge people in why they act the way that they do. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because you think your journey's the norm. You think that your journey is the same as everyone else's, but soon you find out that actually no two journeys are alike, and there's always crazy turns for everyone. And I think, the more experiences you can get in a room or on a field or whatever that is, the better it is for everyone, and the growth for a club or the players or the people is massive.
Definitely.
So I've got a couple more questions for you before I let you go, because I appreciate you've been on for a while. So the first one was, you mentioned quite a lot around tours and whatnot that you've had. And I know from speaking to you before, you kind of done study visits and whatnot. Where would you say is the most impressive, I guess, on the continent would be my guess, place you've been where you picked up an invaluable bit of information or invaluable culture, or something that's really surprised you that you've taken away with you?
Wow. I'm really, really fortunate, because I've just got to experience so much so far. But the one place that I always kind of come back to, in terms of, and it links to something I said before, in terms of I just enjoy really, really, really simple practices, was when I got to go on a study visit to Villarreal. This during when I was doing my ECAS. I was on the ECAS, and you have to organise your own kind of international placement. So it's really funny because, and you can probably see the Barcelona tops behind me. I'm a big fan of Barcelona. I absolutely love Barcelona. I just mentioned the Barcelona Way by Damien Hughes, like in terms of like what that club stands for. The cultural aspect of that club is something that really, really interests me. We were talking yesterday about, after the podcast, about culture, and that is the main driver of a successful club. If you get it right, because that will stand you in good stead for a long time. But I say that I had the opportunity to go to Barca. It was a choice between Barca or Villarreal, and what I thought to myself at the time was, I can imagine Barcelona, being the club that they are, have thousands of coaches that go there every year, hundreds of coaches that go there every year. So they probably have a set program. They'll give you the program and say, you're doing this on Monday, this on Tuesday, and then this on Wednesday. And you probably don't even get to see much. They're probably not even letting you in. It's too deep, So I just thought to myself, it's either that or I can go to a smaller club like Villarreal. Someone had said to me, in terms of he said, think about this: Villarreal, really, really small town. Biggest city next to them is Valencia. The small town. So they're almost like, they could be very, very similar to Wolves. Wolves, small. It's a city, a very small city, but it's a city. But in comparison to Birmingham, I'm from Birmingham, so I understand the size difference. So there's some similarities there. So I thought to myself, you know what, let me go to Villarreal, because I reckon potentially I could probably see more. And I was absolutely right. I saw everything. They showed me absolutely everything. I got to watch first team training, and I pretty much watched every group train from the first team down to the under eights, like absolutely everything. I got to watch a fixture, match days, how they work, practices, this, that, and the other. The one thing that I really, really took away was, two things. The first thing was, again, the culture of the club. everything is streamlined from the first team down. What helps with that is that the first team manager, what's his name? I want to say Jose Callejon, something like that. He was an academy player, first team player, first team manager. So automatically, you're going to get that streamlined through. That's something that Barca kind of pride themselves in as well. They always seem to have these managers that have had a previous link to the club, whether it's through the academy, through the first team. Like at the moment, it's kind of Ronald Koeman. If you look at all the managers they've had, they all either played for they all played for the club. If not, they came through their academy. So you automatically have that streamline. So you can really, really feel that at the club. You know, they took me into the dining room. One thing that in England is everything's kind of separate. Every club is, the first team is separated from the rest of the academy or the rest of the club. So the first team have probably their own dining room. They eat on their own, all that kind of stuff. They get changed in their own place. At Villarreal, the first team ate in the same canteen as the kids, the residential kids. So the kids, from under 12s up, they had a certain amount of children that lived like basically on campus and went to the local school. So the first team players are in the room. The boys, their rooms, they could literally wake up in the morning, open their curtain, and watch first team training. The first team pitch was like right outside the rooms. I just thought culturally that's massive. That's like, for me, the kids are literally within touching distance all the time. They can see the dream. They can see the dream. It's not just a dream. They can see it. So I took that away. From a coaching perspective, the biggest thing I took away was the practices. I saw every team do the same practice. So three team game, one team in this half, I've talked about this on previous kind of podcasts and stuff, that one team in this half, one team in that half, one team on the halfway line. You've probably seen it. The team on the halfway line can go and press. That team, for the red team, say, got to make a certain amount of passes, then transfer the ball to the other side. Every team I saw run this practice. I've seen the first team running it. I've seen the Villarreal B team doing it. I saw the under-19s doing it. I saw the under-14s doing it. I saw the under-11s doing it. I was like, wow, that's serious streamlining throughout the academy. They just have a set of practices that everybody does, and not just everybody. Even the first team were doing it, which I found amazing. And it's a really, really simple practice. So it's a practice that I do all the time with my boys. So yeah, that was kind of one of the best experiences for me. I was there for 5 days. Got to sit down with the head of the academy. I got to sit down with the head of their international program. I got to sit down with people from different departments. Like I say, I got to watch training, and then I just got to watch, just go around the town. They invited me to a first team game, put me in a box for the first team game. So the experience was just incredible. It was really, really good.
Yeah, I think it raises a really interesting point, and I think for those younger lads who are able to see the first teamers every day, what you'll probably see is the amount of commitment and dedication that goes into it, particularly those that are performing well. So you'll see him at lunch, not stuffing his face or eating the right foods, or you'll see him doing extras. So all of a sudden, as a player, you're looking at him going, well, if you've got first teamer doing extras, why aren't I? Or if he's really good at free kicks, I want to be. What does he do in order to do those things? So it's a clear pathway, which I think is really good. And I know that.
I was just going to add just to what you're saying. The proof is in the pudding. So I could say all this, and then someone could turn around and say, "Well, okay, you're saying all that, but how many players are in their first team from their academy? Their first team is pretty much made up of the academy." So at the time I was there, I think the year before, they had beaten Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, and out of the squad of 16, 11 had come directly from their academy. So I think that the proof is that is the proof that you need to say, if you put the kids, the players, within touching distance, and they can see the work that has to be put in at first team level. Like you've just said, they're staying, they're doing extras. Okay, I've got to do it. Then I think it becomes more than a pipe dream. It's actually a reachable, tangible dream rather than it literally just being a dream, which it is for most of our players.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what's interesting you said about the session content is that's quite, from my understanding, the Spanish thing in terms of having a set of drills which everyone does. And I guess I have a bit of a dilemma with it in terms of, does it take your coaches, creativity away to a degree because you're not having to design the sessions? But one thing it does do, which you said there, is it streamlines it. The players know the practice. So it's just about in quality control, assuring, technical outcomes are happening within that practice rather than spending time learning loads and loads of news ones. So I think there's a win-lose or win-win on both. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way, but I think it brings up an interesting dilemma in terms of how do you deal with that. Yeah. I guess. So last question for me is something I ask everyone, which is, who's the best player or coach you've worked with or against, and why?
The best player or coach? Wow, there's been so many like good coaches. Can I tell you about a coaching experience that really changed my view?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so I guess I can name drop him, but it was really kind of in my academy journey, and I've told people this story a number of times. Nick Gittins at Man United. We playing under, I think it was an under 9s game, under 9s, under 10s, and to put it in context, I'm very, very early in my academy journey. So I've come in, I'm under 8s coach of, when I first became a lead coach, I think it was under 9s. And it's the first time I'm playing against Man United. So, Man United, I'm a Liverpool fan by kind of my football, but, I'm not one of these. I'm very much, I respect, the club and, what they've achieved, the players they've produced. So I'm really excited for this game. I'm nervous. I wake up in the morning. I'm probably kind of asleep the night before. I'm like one of the players. I'm playing Man United, and I think we're all like it. I think we get used to it to a certain extent. But one thing that I try not to lose is that feel of, wow, we're playing Chelsea today, we're playing Man United today, we're playing Liverpool today. Like, particularly when you're playing those big clubs, I still get that feeling in my stomach, that excitement. But this was the first time I was playing Man U. So I wake up in the morning, probably before my alarm, because I'm like I say, I'm a bit nervous. I get in early, I get everything set up. I'm like, I've got to be on point today. If my boys have got any chance today, I've got to be on point. Get the kit out, set it all up, go into the dome, set the pitches up because it's like 2 7v7s. I get the balls out, set my warm up. I've spoken to the physio. All right, you're going to take the boys for this amount of time. I'm going to take it for this amount of time. These are the teams. Everything's ready. Buzzing. I think, yeah. There's nothing more I can do now. It's just down to the boys now. Man U turn up. The boys get changed, making loads of noise in the changing room. They walk out. My boys are out already because, again, I'm organised. I want to get them out warm and home. They've got them in it. Bear in mind, it's under 9s football. And actually, when I think back on this now, I just shake my head. I think, what am I thinking? But I was early on. So that's my excuse. I was early on. I didn't know. I was seeing this as, and bear in mind, I've come from coaching under 14s, under 30, under 18s football before that. So Man U come out, coach, football's on his back. I think this wasn't Nick, this was his support coach. He empties the balls onto the pitch, and the Man U lads just start smashing balls all over the dome. Oh, what's going on? I'm expecting, my perception and my expectation is Man U players are going to come out. They're going to be dead drilled. I know they're only under nines, but who cares? They're going to be dead drilled. They're going to be in line. They're going to be doing loads of passing stuff, and I'm ready to watch them to see what they do. They are smashing balls. They're taking free kicks. They're doing all those things that old school coaches say. Don't shoot in the goal. You know what? You got to pull a muscle. Don't shoot in the goal. They're doing all that. About 5 minutes before kickoff, they got into a rondo. So we've got 2 rondos going on. Did a little bit of rondo. I'm thinking there's only 5 minutes to go. Like, they've not even properly warmed up. Time to play. Nick put all the balls back in the bag. He plonked the bag on the side of the pitch, and he sat on the bag with his legs folded and his arms crossed. And all he did all game, well done, try that again. Oh, that was a good effort. This, that, and the other. And I remember there was even one moment in the game where I don't think we had a referee. I'm trying to remember whether we had a referee or not. But there was something happened. I think there might have been a little bit of a foul. So I've looked at Nick. He's gone, nah, give the goal. Like, he, it wasn't about. It was sorry, not it wasn't about. It was all about, one, his players having fun. It was all about his players just trying things and not being afraid to make mistakes. And the result wasn't. I mean, I look back on it and I say, well, one thing I know for sure is he had good players. Man United are always going to have good players, and he did have that. But even so, I believe that even if he was coaching a group that wasn't that good, he would still behave exactly the same. And then the proof in the pudding for that is I've coached against them again at those younger age groups, and I see the same behaviours. So that wasn't just him. That's definitely a Man United thing. I love going and playing away. I don't know whether you've played away against them, particularly under nines, where they play like the 4v. It's quite well known. They play the 4v4s. So you split you group up and you play 4v. There's like a 5v5 game with a goalkeeper, 4v4 4-goal game, and a 4v4 line game. Sorry. So you rotate this round, and all the boys play 4v4. No referees, nothing. That's for the first half of the fixture, and then for the second half of the fixture, you go over onto the main pitches and you play like 2 6v6s or 2 7v7s. And again, when I've done that, the Man United coaches are very, very welcoming. They you're just on the side of the pitch. They offer you a cup of tea. Like, I'm thinking, a cup of tea. Like, I'm meant to be coaching. It says, Mark, do you want a cuppa? All right, there. So you're on the side of the pitch, just having a sip of your tea. The boys are just having fun and playing. It's not. So I think that right there, that experience right there, really opened up my eyes to the fact that, you know what? Why am I treating this like a first team game? Why am I treating this like, the boys have to be in on it? So my attitude changed. So if you speak to anybody about the way in which I prepared the boys for the game, I'm not one of these coaches that, we're on the bus and we're pulling into Bath University and I'm going, lads, you've got to switch on now. I'm none of that. Like, up until we step out on the pitch, I'm laughing and joking. Because I just think that, one, I want the boys to be as relaxed as I want them to be relaxed. I don't want them to feel the pressure of the game. I want them to go into it and because at the end of the day, if we believe in our program, if we believe in what we do throughout the week, and this probably comes from another area. I was watching. I don't know whether you've seen it, the All or Nothing, the New Zealand All Blacks one.
I haven't seen it on yet. It's on my to watch list.
It's really, really good. But basically, the head coach basically does no coaching on the day of a game. Like, nothing. It's only the only person that really speaks to the team is the captain, because he says, if we've done our job Monday to Friday, then when Saturday comes, I shouldn't need to say anything else. Like, everything should be ironed out before the day. And again, that kind of changed my thinking a little. And I know it's a little bit different. I'm not comparing my under 11s to the New Zealand All Blacks, but I think that what it does is you don't need to hear my voice now. You know, you just need to just go on. Obviously, we'll talk about little different things within the game, and I'll drive you and coach you where I feel like that's needed. But yeah, to go back to your original question, I guess Man United foundation phase coaches and kind of their behaviours did have a massive influence on me, because I haven't seen that change. And all the times that I've been lucky enough to play against them, when I look at the coach behaviour, I don't see that change, no matter the circumstance.
Yeah, I think it's a great example, and I think, you know, particularly those younger age groups, got to remember, be it in academy or grassroots football, kids want to have fun. So regardless of what your environment is and how you want to develop them, let them have fun first. And if they enjoy being there, they'll learn, because they'll want to keep coming back. So I think that's a great example. Listen, Mark, I really appreciate your time. Some fascinating stuff, and hopefully we'll see each other face to face soon. And if not, we'll catch up for another one of these calls. I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about.
Brilliant. Cheers, Mike. Really appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
Speak to you soon.
All right, fella.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.